Hello, I'm Dr. Pierre Samaan, and it's wonderful being back with you once again. We've been in the series on depression, and we've been talking about the 4 Ds leading to depression. 4 Ds being difficulty, discouragement, distress, and despair. I just kind of sat down one day and thought, well, I need to put this together somehow. And all of a sudden I saw some Ds in all the writing. I said, oh, let's put some Ds together. It's funny how it all came together, and we'll see some more about how it came together a little bit later. As a Christian, I pray about things, so whenever this happens, I thank God for it all. Difficulty we spoke about, and everybody goes through difficulties. Discouragement we spoke about. Everybody goes through discouragement. Today we're focusing on distress, and distress, because it's a little more serious and can become much more serious, there's a lot more to talk about regarding distress. Then we'll be talking about despair and how that turns into depression. But before we can really explain distress, we have to have a little more of a foundational understanding of what is stress. And there's basically 2 types of stress. There's acute stress and there's chronic stress. Acute stress, we all go through every day. It's stressful just getting up in the morning or doing other things that are, we might be routine, but it's still stress. Driving to work or school or just simple things where there's some pushback going on. So acute stress is short term. It's nothing, no big deal. And sometimes it keeps us alert, so it's not all bad. But acute stress can be like when you slam on the brakes in your car and stop quick, or you get into a little more than a friendly discussion with somebody, or it can be just having fun, going down a ski slope. I don't ski. I used to surf when I was younger and skinnier, but that's long gone. But that would be acute stress sometimes when you're out there, especially when you see sharks and all that going around you. Acute stress helps us to manage our situations that come up. Some might be dangerous situations, some might be just typical situations, but we're having to be a little more alert to it. That alertness is triggered by the stress. And so that's a good thing. I'm sure you would agree with that. It helps me to be more alert when I'm driving, to have acute stress. But we don't want it to go too far, because then it becomes a problem. Good and bad acute stress, as I mentioned earlier. Good stress keeps us keen. Bad stress wears us down and makes things worse. So then that takes us to chronic stress, doesn't it? Chronic stress obviously lasts longer. Most of us don't like chronic stress, but it's typical for a lot of people to have a certain amount of chronic stress, because that's what life is. There's just certain things that are stressful every day, similar things. It can be at the workplace, where you may have a difficult supervisor or employer or coworker, and they bring on that everyday chronic stress. There was a recent article in WebMD that was talking about if you have a bully coworker, or employer, you're more likely to suffer from a stroke or a heart attack. And I thought, well, so I read it a little bit, and they kind of tweaked it a little. It may bring it on sooner if you're going to have one, and they kind of put that in between the lines there. But nonetheless, it's going to cause medical problems and all kinds of other problems. Any type of stress goes on for weeks or months is considered chronic stress. A woman in her pregnancy, 9 months of pregnancy, that's chronic stress. And it impacts her. It impacts her mind, her body, her entire physiology. And when you're adapting, and that's a wonderful thing about us humans, we adapt. Animals have trouble with that. We're kind of, God made us that way. We can make those adjustments over time where we adapt, which means basically with chronic stress, you can adapt to it to a point where you don't even notice it. It's there. It's impacting your entire self, but you're not thinking about it anymore. It's almost like routine or habit. But because you're not thinking about it anymore, it's something outside of your realm of guardedness. What tends to happen is, yes, you adjust, you adapt, you're having chronic stress, but you're not noticing it because it's typical, yet it's still wearing on you, on your mind, your entire physiology, wearing and tearing. And so those individuals may not see it coming, but physical problems are going to come out of that one way or another at some point. Other types of problems will come out of it as well, and we're going to talk about that also. So if you don't find ways to manage stress, it's most likely going to manage you. So it's most likely going to cause problems. And then that takes us into distress, because if you don't manage stress, you're going to be in distress. And I recall when I was putting this together, the memory came back of when I was an undergraduate at Stetson University, and I was honored to be the only Stetson student that was selected to participate in the University of Florida conference on stress. And we went there, and the main presenter of the conference was Dr. Hans Selye. He was an MD and an endocrinologist. That's somebody who studies biology and medicine, and they're concerned with the endocrine glands and the hormones and all that. And most of you probably don't even recognize the name, but he brought stress to the attention of the medical community and the counseling communities, and it was quite an honor, more so after the fact, because at the time I was young and really not appreciative of a lot of things yet. Later on, when I'm reading more about him and learning more, I'm realizing, wow, that was a big deal being there. And I did learn a lot, and I was very grateful for that. He researched the reactions of organisms and to stressors. So when a stress would occur, how did it affect the organism? He showed us all of his pictures or slides on the different key research that he did. Fascinating part, and that was back in 1976. The fascinating part about it was those pictures on. He would have a heart, a beating heart. Once was beating, it wasn't beating in the picture. Fresh, reddish, healthy looking. pinkish, and the heart that was subjected to stress. And these are animals, not people's hearts. And he would show different progressions of it over months, over a longer period of time, weeks, months, and I think there was several over years. Wow, this other organ that had been subjected to stress was smaller. In some cases, half the size, that much. And it wasn't fresh, pinkish, healthy looking. It was whitish. It was not very appealing to look at. And he would take a little tool and he would pop off the fine veins that were on that organ, whether it was a heart or a kidney or whatever. He would show how they would just pop off, unlike the healthy organ. And he demonstrated how that was the calcium deposits, the stress hormones, the results of those stress hormones that entered that organ over a period of time, hardening those veins and arteries. Wow, I never saw anything like that before. And I thought, oh, okay, so let's not get stressed. It certainly makes you try harder not to want to be stressed. In this chart, you can see just a brief diagram of what endocrinologists do and what they study, but we have glands throughout our body, and that's mainly what I wanted you to see here. These glands are important to our daily function, and also in the past we've talked about the limbic system, the amygdala, the fight or flight response, and the thalamus and hypothalamus, and how the hormones, the stress hormones, get flooded into the body when we need them. But when we don't need them and they're continuing to be flooded, they affect these glands and other organs, but these glands are overworking, pushing more of those stress hormones into the body. Well, what happens when that occurs? They get tired, they get exhausted, they kind of stop working in some cases. In other cases, like those organs, they'll shrivel up and they're not as effective, not helping anymore. So Hans Selye, in his studies, he wrote a very thick book and very academic book, and they've since then edited and re-edited it. It's called The Stress of Life. And there's this quote in there that I'd like to read to you by Hans Selye. In its medical sense, stress is essentially the rate of wear and tear in the body. Anyone who feels that wear and tear, whatever he's doing or whatever is being done to him, is tenuous and wearing, it's tearing them down. It's going to impact them. It's going to be stressful. They know vaguely what we mean by stress. So anybody that's stressed knows what you mean by stress, because they can feel themselves wearing down over time. The feelings of just being tired, jitter, or ill are subjective sensations of stress. But stress doesn't necessarily imply a morbid change. In other words, it doesn't mean you're going to die from it. Normal life, especially intense pleasure, and the ecstasy of fulfillment also cause some wear and tear in the machinery of the body. Good stress, bad stress, still causes wear and tear. Go and have fun, play basketball, go fishing even. Some stress involved still causes wear and tear, but certainly not as much as the bad stress when that occurs. So he came up with the stress syndrome, and later he changed that and called it general adaptation syndrome, or GAS, G-A-S, the initials for it. And he broke it down into 3 stages: alarm reaction, stage of resistance, and stage of exhaustion. And simply put, yeah, you can see that happening over time. And of course, he goes into more details in his book about it all. But when I remembered that, I thought, wow, that just fits with this 4 Ds of leading to depression. It gives us that little deeper sense of what's happening there. The analogy of the 4 Ds, when I looked back on this, I could see that analogy occurring. Difficulty, the first D. Well, you know, everybody has it, so it's mild, you know, mild to moderate stress. Discouragement, the second D. Well, okay, now that's taking it a little further, isn't it? Moderate to severe stress, I would say. And moderate to severe stress then is going to activate the alarm reaction. Oh, something's wrong here. I gotta do something about this. This is bothering me, or I don't like this. Or, you know, you're driving. You know you're going to be driving in heavy traffic, and you feel discouraged that you can't just move along, and people are pulling out in front of you, and so on. That alarm reaction. So I'm getting prepared for it. My adrenals are pumping, my fight or flight response is activating, and I'm having to be full attention because my alarm system is letting me know, be careful, something could happen here. So you're extra careful on the road when there's that added traffic, or it's raining, or other things going on that you didn't plan on. Then the third, and what we're going to be talking about, is distress. Distress then would be severe stress activating stage, in which he would identify as the stage of resistance. Distress is when moderate to severe stress turns into severe stress and above. Distress is uncomfortable, you don't like it, and at times it can be very intense. So your mechanism, your physiology, not just your thinking, your entire body goes into a defensive mode. You might not feel it until you're thinking it. You may not realize you're going into a defensive mode, but usually somebody's going to tell you what's wrong, why are you so irritable, or what's happening, or you know, why are you so confused, or why haven't you completed your work. Distress leads into things of task problems and relationship problems and all kinds of other problems. So we're going to be talking next time a little more detail about distress, and we'll focus on that. And then the last on here is despair, that number 4D, uncontrolled stress activating the stage of exhaustion, according to Selye. So I plugged that into uncontrolled stress, and that leads to depression, and we'll be getting into that in the future. So stick with us. If you learned something new today, press that like button down below, and I'll catch you next time as we continue on distress. God bless.